Blog Talk Radio.
Hello everyone, this is Laurie Smith on Blog Talk Radio. Good morning, it's 6 o'clock here in the morning, Calgary, Alberta. This is One Child Abuse Survivor to Another, and we're on for 30 minutes. It's a live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com. I've got the chat room open if anybody would like to sit in there. I'm just having some coffee, trying to wake up here, and just happy to be able to do these shows. I can't believe how many I've actually done. I think there's excuse me, probably about 270 shows or something like that. But I've had almost 6,000 shows have been listened to, so I just really appreciate that. I thank everyone for tuning in and everyone for passing the word and sharing my shows with people, and it's just awesome, and I appreciate it very much. This week we're going to talk about, and we are talking about emotional abuse and the actual effects that it has on children, and then later on as adult survivors of child abuse, right? Emotional abuse is very damaging, and a lot of times people say, well, emotional abuse can't be as possibly as damaging as physical abuse or all the other types of abuse, right? But it is very damaging, and it's very hard to get over because it actually, it sort of messes with a person's whole psyche, their whole entire view of life and their world around them, and also themselves in that world. And so that's why I think it's just so important that we just keep on talking about this stuff. It's just there's so many survivors out there who probably have experienced emotional abuse as well as physical abuse, and because emotional abuse goes hand in hand with child sexual abuse and physical abuse, right? That will be present in all the forms of abuse. So that's the whole issue. It's very damaging, and so that's why I want to take a look at it. So I appreciate everybody tuning in. I'm not a professional counselor. I don't hold any counseling certificates. I'm just a person who does pays to do my own blog talk show because I really just wanted to be one more voice to get information out to people. And also, as a survivor of child abuse, I just wanted to be one more voice to say, to really just to encourage people to hold on and to keep moving forward on their journey, at their own pace and what they're comfortable with, and continue on and to hold on, because I know how hard it is, and to keep moving forward and on their healing journey, just to be one more voice to say you can do it, and we can do it. So this is the whole issue. I do believe that 100%, and it's hard. There's no doubt about it, but it's worth it. We deserve to have a good life. We deserve to know what it's like to wake up in the morning and be happy about being on this earth and happy with who we are. And, if you're growing up abused as an abused child in a violent home or an abusive home, or if you've just been abused somewhere, in your lifetime, it's hard because the abuse happened. And it doesn't, just because you're healing on your healing journey doesn't mean that it didn't happen. But there are ways to cope, and there are ways to put it in its perspective and put it where it belongs, and to allow yourself to experience joy and peace and happiness and whenever we can. And so that's the whole issue. I just wanted to be one more voice out there to say, I hope everybody will hang on and get some help, and not suffer in silence, right? Silence is such a huge issue, and I know because I did it myself. I suffered in silence for 41 years, and it was so painful, to wake up at the age of 40 and still feeling the same way that I felt all the way through growing up in the home that I did and experiencing what I did experience. So that's the whole issue, and it's taken me 3 years, but I have really made some real progress, and that's why I just want to be one more voice to say you can do it and be, some support for people, and just another voice to say that we need to stop child abuse, and this is the reason why. We have to stop it, and that's all there is to it. We have to find ways to prevent it, and we have to find ways to help survivors. So I just appreciate everybody tuning in. If you're under the age of 18, please ask, for permission to listen to my shows. And the reason I ask that is because I fight for child's rights. I fight for children's lives. I'm standing up to try to save children. And online safety is such a huge problem, and you have to be very careful if you're a young person and you're listening to whatever on the internet. You have to be really careful what you're doing, because there's a lot of really crazy people out there who are looking to hurt children, and they'll do anything that they can to get a hold of them, which is very sad. It's very sick and very wrong, but it's the truth. And so we can't just deny it and say, oh, it won't happen to me, or it wouldn't happen in my neighborhood, or wouldn't happen on the internet sites that I go to, on the chat rooms that I go to, you have to be very careful, and there's lots of tips on how to stay safe online, and you can get those, you can type into your browser, which is what I did, internet safety, child online safety, internet safety for children. The FBI has a great website regarding how to keep yourself safe and your family safe online, and I like that website. It's the FBI's internet safety website, and you want to get the education, and you want to learn how to keep yourself safe so that you don't end up a victim of a child sexual predator, or end up with losing your life, being killed or murdered, or just sexually abused by one of these child sexual predators out here, or pedophiles. So be very, very careful what you're doing, and that's why I ask everyone to have permission to listen to my shows. And you can have someone listen to an archive with you just to see if it's something that you should be listening to, because I don't know where the Blog Talk players are now. It's hard to say. They could be anywhere, placed on different websites, and so I just ask that people just, do me a favor and do yourself a favor. Keep yourself safe online. So we'll get right into this article. We left off yesterday morning talking about facts to consider regarding emotional abuse, and that children who see or hear their mothers or fathers being abused are victims of emotional abuse because they're growing up in that environment. It's terrifying, it says, and severely affects a child's psychological and social development. And what I'm looking at is an article that came from Child Abuse Prevention Resources from the Public Health Agency of Canada, and that's www.phacc-aspc.gc.ca. Health Canada. Emotional abuse, it's information from the National Clearinghouse on Family Violence is where I got this. And emotional abuse is there's no universal, accepted definition of emotional abuse, but they have narrowed it down, and these are the most recognized forms of emotional abuse, which would be rejecting, degrading, terrorizing, isolating, corrupting and exploiting, and denying emotional responsiveness. And so those are the typical, the typical forms, recognized forms that they would include and say that is emotional abuse, right? If you've ever experienced it, then you would know that's exactly what it is. I'm a survivor of child abuse, physical, psychological, verbal, emotional, and sexual. So I know firsthand what it's like. It's horrible. It's absolutely horrible to grow up in a situation like that, especially when there's no help and there's no hope. And year after year after year, it just continues on, and the psychological damage is quite damaging. And from one survivor to another, it's very, very hard to overcome something like that. And even if you weren't abused as a child, but you're in a domestic violence situation or a domestic abuse situation, you would understand the same things, because that's what you're going through, is this terrorizing, isolating, controlling, rejecting and corrupting, exploiting. That's emotional abuse, and it happens to people all the time. It's absolutely horrible that people do this to each other, it does cause a lot of problems. And then we were talking about the fact that many women and even men in physically abusive relationships feel that the emotional abuse is more severely debilitating, and actually worse than the physical abuse that was in the relationship, because the emotional abuse is what stays at you and eats at your very heart, it can tear your life up. And of course, the physical abuse is bad, but when you add, the damage done by the emotional abuse, it seems worse, because it's your heart, and that's where the pain is. Like I was talking yesterday, physical pain. Lots of people who suffer in physically abuse have suffered physical abuse. You might still have a lot of problems with physical ailments due to the abuse, right? But what really was hurting me, even though I have a lot of physical pain in my body and I have to deal with it on a daily basis, it was the pain in my heart that was killing me. I could deal with that physical pain every day in my body, but what was going on in my heart was what was really killing me. And so that's the issue, and that's what we have to really face. And we have to learn that life is worth living, and that we do have to learn to love ourselves, and to not, to actually go back and sort of undo what was said and undo what was put upon us, as far as berating and name calling and shaming and making us feel a certain way about ourselves, right? Because we certainly didn't deserve that. And then we don't deserve to carry that on into our adult lives, but even though we do, quite often do that. If you don't get help, you suffer with that the rest of your life. And I'm glad that I took a different view, a different look at myself. I still have to work on things too, but the fact is I learned how to love myself and learned how to embrace myself for who I am, and to love that person and that wounded person that was inside of me, that wounded child that was very angry and very miserable and depressed and suffering terribly. You know what I mean? So I had to learn how to nurture myself and comfort myself, and it did help a lot. It also helped to know, for me to take a stance that I started to feel that I did count, and I was worth something, and I did count in this life. You know what I mean? And by taking another look at it and realizing that my parents were very sick, and what they said was not true, and what they did was not right, it allowed me to realize that it wasn't my fault, and I didn't deserve any of that. And I started to kind of rise above, a little bit above the view that my parents had painted a picture of me when I was a young girl. So that's the whole issue. I see myself in a different way now, and that has helped me a lot in my healing journey. And it also helped me to realize that I did count, and I did matter, and I did deserve to have a good life. So that's why it's so important to get help, If you can't manage that as self-help, then you need to have someone else help you, like therapists, counselors, trained professionals who can take a look at the situation and then help you, you know what I mean? Group support, if you don't trust therapists and whatnot. I really like group support, and that's what I did. I joined a couple of online group support for survivors of child abuse, and it was very helpful to have someone to talk to who knew, the same situations kind of, even though they varied a bit because no one's abuse is exactly the same. We all have to own our own abuse, which is sad, but we don't all know exactly what each of us has been through. But the thing is we know how much it hurts, and we know that we might have experienced similar things, and of course then it's very good to have someone to talk to who's experienced something similar to the abuse that you did, so that you have someone to relate with, validate the abuse, to understand and to not sympathize, but empathize, and say, I know, I've been there, and I know how hard it is. And then also they might have resources and some good books that you can read that help them get through, right? And so that's the whole thing. It's so important just to get help, no matter what way you do. Reach out and get some help. Make sure that you do, so you don't continue to suffer your whole entire life after suffering as a child. That's what I decided. I got mad, and I'm like, why do I have to spend the rest of my life like this when I was already subjected to this? It wasn't even my fault. And what, now I'm going to pay the price for it for the rest of my entire life? I started to get very angry, and I thought, this is ridiculous. I deserve to have a good life. And then I thought, why am I just sitting on the couch? I need to get involved. So that's the whole issue. It's been very proactive for me to get involved and start speaking out about this stuff. And so I would just hope everybody would just get some help, It says here that we looked at the fact that repeated verbal abuse, such as blaming, ridiculing, insulting, swearing, yelling, and humiliating, has long-term negative effects on a woman's self-esteem and contributes to feelings of uselessness, worthlessness, and self-blame. And of course that goes for men too. For men's self-esteem, for children's self-esteem, repeated verbal abuse and ridiculing and blaming and swearing and yelling and humiliating certainly does have a long-term effect, a bad negative effect on anyone who's experienced it. And it contributes to the feelings of uselessness, worthlessness, and self-blame. And that's where I sat my whole entire life, except for the self-blame, because I kind of knew that obviously all the stuff especially that my mom did to me, definitely was not my fault. You know what I mean? None of it was my fault. I realized that. But the thing is I felt very worthless and very useless, and really that I didn't fit in, and that I didn't belong here. I always felt very much that I was not, that I didn't belong to be on this earth, and that I wasn't ever going to fit in, and I was never going to be able to be just a person who would be happy to wake up in the morning and be content, and because I had all of these memories and all of these feelings, right? And so that's the whole issue. It's very, very damaging to people, and that's why I hope people would know that. And if you're a parent, do not do this to your children, because it's really damaging. And if you're a parent, make sure that you watch what you say before you say it. And if you do make a mistake and say something that you shouldn't have, make sure that you make up for it and think about it very clearly, and don't do it again. And then do the right thing and apologize to your children, and make sure that they know that you're sorry and that you won't do it again. And then don't do it again, because it's so extremely damaging to a child. So it says here, we'll just keep reading on. Threatening, this is where we left off yesterday. Threatening to kill or physically harm a female partner or her children. I don't know why they just stuck with the female partner. You know, this is a good article, but they kind of, you know, we know that men are abused as well, and we know that there are females out there who do abuse men and in relationships. So they should have actually put, you know, male or female partners, right? So that's what I'm going to add as I go through. Threatening to kill or physically harm a partner's children or other family members or pets establishes dominance and coercive power on the part of the abuser. And the female partner or the male partner feels extremely terrorized, vulnerable, and powerless really within the relationship. And this type of emotional abuse can make people feel helpless and isolated, and it really does. I actually do a lot of work, like not a lot of work, but a lot of research on domestic violence and abuse, right, and how it affects children, because that's how I grew up. And so, you know, it's very, very hard to deal with it if you've ever experienced anything like that. I've never experienced domestic violence firsthand, as I've never had a partner who was abusive, but the thing is I have experienced it secondhand, and so I know what it's like to grow up around it. Jealousy, possessiveness, and interrogation about whereabouts and activities are controlling behaviors, which can severely restrict a partner's independence and freedom. Social and financial isolation may leave the person dependent upon the abuser for social contact, money, and the necessities of life, and that can happen. They'll take over a person's whole entire life. And see, I know because in my own family, within my own family, not my parents, but siblings, you know, one of my siblings, she controlled her husband that way, and he was abused. She was the abuser. But see, she grew up. My mother was her mother. You know what I mean? Like, she grew up with the same mother I did, and our mother was very violent and very vicious. Although she did abuse us, and my dad, everybody was just abusing everybody in our family. It was really quite sick and stupid, and it just reminded you something out of a back hills, you know, some sort of backwoods thing. You know what I mean? It was just ridiculous. Everybody was just abusing everybody, and it was just so stupid. But anyway, it did happen, and that's the way it goes. And so we know women can be abusers too, as well as men. So anyone can be an abuser. Anyone. They choose to abuse, they're an abuser. Young children can be abusers. They abuse younger children or smaller children, weaker children, children with disabilities, bully people, you know what I mean? Anyone can be an abuser if they choose to do so. And it's their choice to do it, and that's why I think it's extremely wrong, and they should have to pay the penalties and pay their dues if they're going to abuse people. It doesn't matter who they are, you know what I mean? They should. That's why abuse should be reported, and these people should have to do their time, and then find out what's wrong with them, why they're doing what they're doing, and you know, especially we know the whole issue surrounding child sexual predators and whatnot. I mean, you see some of these articles in the paper; they are very sick, you know, and whether they can ever be completely treated is really questionable, because some of them even say themselves after treatment, after they experience treatment, they have treatment, then they get out and they're still afraid that they'll do the same things to children. And so that's the whole issue. Is it ever curable? Is it ever something that these people can actually get over? I don't know, because a lot of it is mental issues, and if there's just something wrong with their brain and the way that they think, you know, what can you do? You know what I mean? Besides just lock them up forever, which is really a good idea if they're going to be a repeat offender. But within our own families even, it's really difficult when you have somebody who's mentally ill, who continues to abuse, and then, you know, even though they know it's wrong, and they still do it anyway because they've got mental problems. And that's my case. My dad is borderline schizophrenic, and he doesn't really acknowledge the abuse that he put on my mom especially. He likes to make it out that he loved her very much, which is really false and wrong, because everybody, actually we all, and there's so many people that do know how he treated her, you know, but in his own mind he thinks that's the way it was. He thinks it was great, and so he's in his own mind he's formed this false world that he supposedly lived in the whole time we were growing up, which wasn't the one that we grew up in. And so that's the whole issue. He's mentally ill. He's borderline schizophrenic. He's got problems with reality and with everything else. And my mom was manic depressive. So there you go. You get two people with mental issues, you're going to have a lot of problems with 7 children. you know, especially when they grew up in the situations that they did, because my parents were both abused, right, as children. So it's just horrible, right? And they just passed on the cycle, passed on their own ignorance, and did a whole lot of damage to one family. And this is what happens. People think, how could that possibly happen? Well, it does. And it's so incredibly sad when it does, you know, and it's just not right at all. So that's why it's very important for people to get help. It says here, emotional abuse can have serious physical and psychological consequences on people, including, and children, right, including severe depression, anxiety, persistent headaches, back and limb problems, and stomach problems, because emotional abuse can actually kind of manifest in the body, right? If you're experiencing a lot of emotional and psychological abuse, of course you're going to be uptight all the time, and you're going to hold your body, you know, a certain way, and you're going to be probably down most of the time. It does manifest in the body, and it can cause a lot of problems and make people very, very sick, physically as well as they're, you know, mentally and psychologically. And it says here, women who are psychologically abused but not physically abused are 5 times more likely to misuse alcohol than women who have not experienced abuse. And senior abuse is still a new issue, and there is little research on this field on emotional abuse, even though this article is really old, so there is lots of information now on elder abuse, right? And it's very, you know, and even the abuse of people who are disabled, right? We know that this happens, and there's lots of information out there. It says here, abusers may often outwardly display anger and resentment toward the senior or anyone else in the company of others. They may also display a complete lack of respect or concern for the senior by repeatedly interrupting or publicly humiliating her or him. And they even, you know, anyone can do that, even in a married couple or a couple, you know, 2 partners, you know, it's not uncommon to see another partner berate the other one in public. And you know, it's just wrong for people to do that. But I don't know why they think that they should be allowed to get away with it. But the thing is what the problem is a controlling factor. And then when they get home behind closed doors, if the other partner speaks out and says, hey, I don't like what you did today, if the other partner is abusive, and then it could cause a lot of problems. It could cause a fight, and it could cause them to become more controlling. And then, of course, if the other person is not strong enough to get out of the relationship, or strong enough to see, you know, just exactly what's going on, that the person is actually going to try to control and manipulate their entire life. If they don't see that right away, they'll just stay in that relationship, and they'll just continue on, and it'll just keep going on and get worse. That's the whole problem with that whole issue. We go, you know, with domestic violence and abuse, and because, you know, the person, you know, this is the person you're supposed to, who loves you, right? You think, oh, well, this person loves me; they would never hurt me, and that's just that's just false. You know, just because somebody loves you doesn't mean they won't hurt you. Chances are they will, because people are always hurting people that they love, right? And that's just a false perception to think that because we love somebody they won't hurt us, or because we love them we should allow them to do what they do. And that's the whole issue. You know, I had to learn to separate that because growing up in my home, you know, and seeing it, witnessing all the violence and abuse and having it inflicted on me, I actually became very hateful and very angry about the whole thing. I started to hate my parents as a young person, and thought that I did hate them, you know, and really wanted to. I wanted to hate them, you know. I didn't want to love them, but I knew in my heart that was not right, because I did love them, see, as my parents, and that's the whole issue of my family. I love my family very much, but I hated what had happened. I hated to see what was going on. I hated what they were doing to each other and to us, you know. And even today, I still hate what they did. I can't condone it. I don't agree with it, and it was completely wrong. And so, you know, but I had to learn I had to learn to see the fact that I actually did love them, you know, in order for me to actually be able to sort of say, you know, that's why I did what I did. That's why I didn't, you know, reach out or phone the police, or, you know what I mean. A lot of people ask, well, why didn't you get out when you had the chance, when there was an intervention done? And there was many reasons for it. You know, there's lots of, it's very psychological and emotional reasons why I didn't, why I asked them not to phone the police. You know, because I didn't want to be removed from my home, because there was 7 children, and out of 7 children, I was the only one that my mom wanted to throw out of the house. And so, you know, growing up not being rejected and isolated really by her, and also being physically abused and verbally abused by this woman who was my mother, And then see that, I was really the only one kind of singled out with her abuse, you know what I mean, directed towards me, was because I was born out of rape, marital rape. And so that's the whole issue. She did not want me, and she had a hard time probably with the fact that I even made it and was alive, you know what I mean. She was very unhappy about the whole thing. So that's the sad part, right? And so she couldn't love me even as much as she probably wanted to. She had a hard time every time she saw me. It probably reminded her of the fact that she was raped by her husband, which he was doing for years and years. My dad, with marital rape, right? So this is the whole issue. I mean, I witnessed it myself, and it's so incredibly damaging for children to grow up like that, And so by the time I had a chance to have an intervention done, and they really wanted to report it because they know the laws. They knew the laws. This was a long, long time ago, but they knew them, and I told them no, because I didn't want to be removed from the home, because I was determined to stay in that home and be part of that family, and force my mom to love me and force my mom to care about me, which of course really never did happen. I should have had them report the abuse to the police. I would have probably been removed from the home, and as I was the last child growing up in the home, and I was 13 and a half at the time, and I already experienced a lifetime of abuse, so I'm sure I would have been removed from the home. And who knows, you know what I mean? I could have gone into a worse situation. Who knows, right? That's the whole issue. We don't know why we do what we do. I mean, what would happen because of it. The whole issue is that that's the reason I stayed and didn't want to be removed, because I was determined to force my parents to take responsibility for me. I was like, you guys put me here on this earth, and you are going to treat me as one of your children, which is just horrible because none of us were treated properly. But I wanted her to accept me as she did my sister, my other sister, and my 4 brothers, or 3 brothers. So that's the whole issue, right? It's pretty sad, that to have a parent like reject you, and out of all siblings, you would be the only one that would be not wanted, not loved, and made to feel that you did not belong there, right? So that's the whole issue, and that's why I did what I did. But that's sad, and this is what we know happens to people, and it's just so hard on people. The abusers, they choose to do what they do. So it was hard. I had to do a lot of work on myself to get myself to realize that I did love my family very much. Did not want to see them suffer like they did. Sad is what happens to people, right? 2 of my brothers died due to drug abuse, and one committed suicide. The other one died of a drug overdose in Calgary, Alberta. Another one of my brothers was killed or murdered at the age of 19, and so that was many years ago. So, a lot of most of our family's gone now. There's a few siblings, that's it, and my dad. And, we're so dysfunctional, we've never been able to ever really do anything about it, because we are so screwed up that if we bother to bring it up, it would kill us. It would definitely, because we would probably go into some sort of a screaming fit for too long, and it would just, nobody wants to deal with it. Nobody wants to get any help, and nobody wants to deal with it. That's why I'm dealing with it. And that's why I said no more. Like 6-7 months ago, I started writing a blog, and I started to think, I'm speaking up. I'm raising my voice. There is no way I'm going to let these guys get away with what they did. And 2 of my brothers lying in their grave with, in shame and silence, really, because they were the most abused out of the boys, I think, as far as what I could see. I was a witness, I know. So that's why they're dead, right? They just couldn't take it. So that's the whole issue. They could not survive in this world. They could not survive the abuse, even though they lived to be in their 30s and 40s. They took their own lives due to the fact that they could never escape the horror that they went through as children. And so, I was headed on that road myself, and that's why I really encourage people to stay with this. You know what I mean? Don't give up, and never give up, because that's what I said. I'm fighting this fight because I want to win. I want to stay alive, and I want to have a good life. And of course, by doing that, I win and my abuser loses, because it's really just a slap in the face for them. That I am making it, I'm doing well, and they could not crush me or destroy me. And so that's what I really want for people to realize, that you do count, you do matter, you do deserve to have a good life, and I want to see everybody to understand and know that they need to love themselves for just who they are, and to find some joy in this life, and find some happiness and peace, And I wish that for everybody. So have a great day, everybody. We've got about a minute left, and I'm so thankful for y'all tuning in. And if you need anything, get a hold of me on Blog Talk Radio here, or send me a message or Facebook. And just if you need resources, or if I can help you find something, we'll be back on I'll be back on tonight with Dreamcatchers Talk Radio with Elizabeth Roberts Brawley at 10 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm also back on my show tonight at 9:30 Mountain Standard Time for Child Abuse Prevention. Human Rights Abuse Prevention is up to us. And then I'll see you guys back here tomorrow morning, 6 o'clock in the morning, for one child abuse survivor to another. We'll continue working through this article, and you guys just take care. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.